This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
At Evernorth Health Services, we believe costs shouldn't get in the way of life-changing care. And we're doing everything in our power to make it possible. Behavioral health solutions that also keep your projections at their best? It's possible. Pharmacy benefits that benefit your bottom line? It's possible. Complex specialty care that cares about your ROI? It's possible. Because we're already doing it. All while saving businesses billions. That's Wonder made possible. Learn more at evernorth.com/wonder.
Welcome back to YAOK. This is Alyssa and
I am Eric.
Thank you for joining us again this week. How's your week going, Eric?
My week is going great. I've been very productive. I've been doing, I am in full-blown promo mode because my third book is coming out about 33 days from today.
Oh my God. How does that feel?
Exciting. I'm actually more nervous about this one than I was the last one because there's like an expectation this time.
Yeah.
Because it's a sequel. So.
Right.
But all of the early readers have loved it. And I think that they all loved the first one as well. So
yeah,
I am feeling less anxious, but there's still a little bit of anxiety. It's a lot to live up to.
I get that. And it's also like knowing that you have 30 days feels like the slowest Band-Aid rip of all time.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
And I do have events coming up too that weekend afterwards. And I'm like, oh my God, do I have to start planning those things?
Oh my God. That's a lot. Having that hanging over you, I'm sure you're so excited to just like get to that actual day.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I'm also editing a book. I'm drafting a book. And I have HVAC coming in tomorrow, which is why we can't do an episode tomorrow. And then it's a busy week. I'll say that.
I weirdly have had yesterday and the day before, my mom, she works at a school. I feel like I've started 3 different stories. My mom works at a school. Thank you. My mom works at a school. And so she got yesterday and the day before off for Passover. And so I felt like my mom was just home and I was home and my mom was home. And we were like, I felt like it felt like a weekend. It felt like 2 more Sundays. And I was like, that's not how this works. I have to actually do stuff. But I spent a large chunk of my day yesterday at the DMV, which, was thrilling.
Great place to read.
I was with my mom, so we were just yapping.
She ruined everything.
Yeah, but I needed her emotional support because the DMV scares me.
Definitely.
But I got New York plates on my car. I had California plates up until now, so I finally did that. It was a good, I needed to cross that off my list so badly that being able to actually do it felt phenomenal.
Do you have that thing where you put something off that you're like, oh, I really don't want to do it. And you put it off and put it off and put it off. And then you finally do it. And you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Literally. The fact that
That's
I was
every single thing I do.
I was like, I can't believe that I procrastinated on that. I can't believe how long I pushed it because that was really dumb. It was so easy. I should have just done it.
Yeah.
And will I ever learn? No. Probably not.
I had to do something like that this week. I was like, it was just this thing. I think it was something for taxes or something because I always get my accountant to extend it. I'm like, you filed an extension, right? And he's like, it's April 14th. Yeah, I filed an extension for you. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Love ya.
Love ya.
And it really doesn't take, it's just organizing things. And I hate organizing. I mean, this is like literally all of my tax stuff right here.
My
I
God,
just need to scan
Eric. And then once it's done, it's like exciting if you get a refund and I look forward to getting that money randomly. No,
I don't get refunds.
I
no, since I'm a published author, they ask for money. They're you already had all of this money sitting in your account for a year. You should be paying us now. I'm like, all right. That's what anytime I get paid, everything immediately goes into savings. Mm-hmm. And then I keep it there until tax time. And then I go, okay, now I actually have money. Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. It's tough when you do anything that's like a freelance gig. doing taxes is a freaking nightmare. This year I actually did get money back, and that's because I spent so much like to get an LLC started and like all this other bull crap. And for some reason, the miles on my car get me a lot back for my taxes. And yeah, so like if you don't do that.
So I should start driving to book festivals.
You should drive to a Starbucks and record our podcast from there and just start tracking those miles, because it really like it makes such a difference.
I went to Spain for a vacation with my husband the beginning of the month. And like while I was there, we were like going on like doing tours and stuff like that. And as I'm like sitting there on a tour listening to this tour guide, I'm like, ooh, wait, this is a good idea for like a book. And I like I ignore him and I start like only focusing on the book. I'm like, wait, this is research. Am I allowed to write this off? So now I'm going to start, anytime I travel, I'm going to bring a journal with me and every night take notes of what I learned that day that I can put into books.
I love that idea.
That will be good enough for the IRS to not come after me.
I love that idea. I also feel like they got bigger fish, don't they?
Definitely much bigger than me.
Yeah.
As a writer, I get to write off Hulu, Netflix, HBO. I mean, I use my friend's HBO login, but that's only because I don't know how to really get it if I don't have cable login. So
HBO, you can get, it's like HBO Now.
Yeah, they change it all the time.
Whatever.
Max, I think.
I don't know. Anyway, we had
the other
Rex.
reason I did.
Yeah. Confusing. Don't need that extra confusion in my life. I'm procrastinating basic tasks. I don't need anything extra. But we had Rex Ogle on the pod today, and it was such a good episode.
This is such a good episode. And it was like, it's interesting because it's like we just had Hannah Sawyer on, who kind of had this fictional version of her story told through poetry. And then Rex actually writes memoirs. So he has taken his true life story and turned it into a trilogy of books. And I think it's interesting to kind of see the different way that authors write things like that, like where Hannah approached it and then where Rex approaches it. I think. Yeah. And you know, I didn't even plan to have them back to back.
Back to back. It just worked. Look at that.
It just worked out.
Honestly, you just are naturally that good at it. You're good at this. And so that's how this all happened.
This is such a great episode, though.
It is. We had a really good time. We talked about horror. We talked about like his writing process. As usual, Eric's the most chaotic in the room. And
always.
And it was a lot of fun. So we hope you enjoy this episode. It was awesome. Thank you, Rex, for coming on.
5 long years, our lives like magnetic fields. You are my universe. You are my universe. And I'm just a planet.
So, hi, Rex. Thanks for coming in and talking with us today. I'm excited to talk to you about all of your books, pretty much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I can't believe how much you've written. Like off the bat.
I was just going to say that. I was like, I think you're our most prolific guest that we have had so far.
I've said this before and I've said it again. I feel like there's no way I've ever had an original thought, because the more that like we do this podcast, I'm like, wow, these are such creative ideas. I can't believe how many ideas you've had. That's amazing.
I have a spreadsheet in years.
I want to introduce your books first too, because there's your most recent one is Road Home, which is the marketing for it says it's the third in your trilogy of memoirs, but I also saw is the Abuela Don't Forget Me, is that like its own separate thing?
Yeah, they count that as like a Star Wars Rogue One. Like it's it's part of the series, but not necessarily part of a trilogy.
Got it.
So you have the 3 memoirs as the trilogy. It's Free Lunch, Punching Bag, and Road Home.
Yes.
And then there's fiction that's a Supernatural Society.
Yeah.
You have X-Men comics, Superman comics. You also publish under a pen name, Ray Terciero.
Yep.
And in that one, you have a bunch of graphic novels that are like updated versions of classics like Little Women, Don Quixote, Swan Lake. Dan of Green Gables comes out next year.
Yep.
And then my favorite is North Ranger, which is a remake of North Ranger Abbey by Jane Austen.
Yeah.
I mean, again, prolific.
And you forgot the Scholastic books, which Four Eyes and Pizza Face and Weirdo, which are also technically a trilogy and also memoir.
They're middle grade though, so we don't count them. We don't count them here at YA. Okay.
How do you constantly have ideas? How do you do that?
I mean, I've wanted to be a writer since I was like 5. I always loved story. And so all through my 20s and 30s, I was just having ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote them all down and I kept them. I mean, Supernatural Society was something I came up with when I was 19 or 20.
Wow.
It just took a long time. I mean, like 20 years to get done. But like when I was in New York for 15 years working as an editor, and I would work all day and then come home and write 3 hours every night.
Wow.
And I went out with probably 15 novels and they were all rejected. So yeah, basically I have a well of ideas and I'm just ready to make all of them into real books.
That's amazing.
I mean, we talk about rejection here a lot because everybody, if you want to be a writer, you have to realize you're going to be rejected a lot. And I hate the stories where it's like really, really famous authors are like, oh, well, my book got rejected 7 times. I'm like, oh, good for you. I was rejected like 350 times. Go fuck yourself. Are you kidding me?
Right? 100%.
It always pisses me off when it's like, oh, 7 rejections. It's like, no, get into 3 digits, then come talk to me.
Right, like that must be so hard for you.
Yeah. Or the writers were like, oh, it was my first try. I've never written a book before. And I'm like, I got a deal right away. It's like, oh, really?
That makes me want to jump out a first floor window.
But they say rejection is redirection. And so,
I like that.
It could be that it's just redirecting you towards maybe something that's going to come out first and put you in a better place. Who knows?
Yeah, 100%.
I also like the things that got rejected for you. Do you go back to them and kind of pull things from them for newer projects ever? Because I do that sometimes.
Yes and no. I mean, like some of them, like I will be like, is this better as a middle grade? It will get me to rethink things. And I'm like, okay, I was doing this as YA, but it might work as a middle grade or vice versa. There are some adult ideas that I had that I'm like, well, the protagonists are all 20, so I'll just make them 18 and then it's young adult.
Right.
Yeah, so I definitely keep the ideas. Some of them are perfect as is, and I will eventually write them, and publishers will publish them.
Whether they like it or not.
That's right. Come on.
I do want to talk about writing memoirs, because that's something that I feel like has to be, in my mind, it has to be like more anxiety inducing, because if you write fiction and somebody's like, oh, I just didn't like this character, it's like, okay, well, that's fine, you suck. But then if it's like, oh, well, I really didn't like this person in this memoir, it's like, now, okay, they're talking about you. You're putting like so much of yourself out there. Are you, when you first set out to start writing memoirs, were you nervous about that? Like nervous about putting your life out there for people?
100, no, make that 1,000%. Because essentially, like I said, like 15 years of rejection, I was just like, what am I doing wrong? And then finally, this one editor was like, you know narrative, you know plot, you know action, you know dialogue, you don't know emotion. And I was like, what do you mean? There's a love story. And they were like, no, but where are you in this? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about me. Like, there's nothing. Like, I was shying away. And you know what? This is probably internal homophobia or society stuff, but I was writing white, straight, male characters. And because I was like, that's just all I'd ever seen. And I'm half Mexican, I'm gay, I come from poverty, and that was stuff I never wanted to talk about. But I was like, okay, as a challenge to myself, I'm going to write a book about 6th grade, free lunch, living in poverty with domestic violence, true story. It was the hardest thing I'd ever written. And once again, rejected across the board.
Wow.
And I was devastated. I was like, what the? And then I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post about my dad kicking me out for being gay. And a publisher who had just started an imprint at Norton, which is it's a very classic publisher, and they were starting Norton Young Readers. And he's like, I would like you to be on our debut list. Let's do the book about your dad kicking you out for being gay. And I was like, absolutely not. But I wrote a book called Free Lunch, and it's ready to go. And I gave it to him, and he was like, let's do it.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, so Free Lunch sat on the bookshelf collecting dust for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then Road Home is that story about your father kicking you out, right? You finally did you get to a place where you were just like, you know what, I am ready to write this story and kind of tell everybody about that now?
I still don't necessarily want to talk about it, because the thing I learned with Free Lunch is like, I wrote it. It was painful. Like every time I finish a chapter, it was like crying. It was depression for days. It was panic attacks. It was, I'm going to need a bottle of wine now. Then the librarians responded really well to it. I get these kids writing me on Instagram being like, this is what I'm going through. This is what I needed to read. I needed to feel not alone. And I was like, well, shit, I always felt alone my whole life. And so if I can make someone feel less alone, that's worth it. So then I went to Punching Bag, which is high school, even darker than Free Lunch. And then I took a break with Abuela Don't Forget Me. And then my publisher's like, are you going to do Road Home? And I was like, okay, let's dive in. Let's do it. So I think I'm more equipped than I was with Free Lunch. Like, I have rituals and routines, and it's painful writing, but once it's done, it's done. And then I think now that I've written 4, I realized all the shit I've survived, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you did that. Like, you made it out on the other side, which is huge.
Yeah.
And being able to share that, like going through, especially even having the note of like, where are you in all of your stories, and like bringing emotion into your stories. And then like soon after, in at least the timeline of your writing, you ended up writing something that's like the most emotional and the most you that you possibly could. Yeah. That's huge that you were able to do that. And even like reading, I haven't read Free Lunch. I read the little summary of not a summary, but like the blurb about it. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. It's just like, I feel like it would like tear my heart out and rip it into a million pieces. And knowing that that's your lived experience and you also wrote it is like so special. And I can't imagine what it's like for other people to also be able to have a piece and be like, oh my God, this is my life, and someone else has experienced it and they made it out on the other side and have now written amazing books. And
I think that's the important thing that I'm trying to remember, is that so many of these, I mean, literally millions of kids are living in poverty and don't have access to lunch unless they go to school. And then, I mean, domestic violence happens all the time. And then as for homelessness, I mean, that is a real issue in today's society. I mean, I live in LA. I see homelessness every day. There's encampments all over the city. I hear about it all over California, New York, Texas, and a large percentage of those are immigrants. But the next big percentage is LGBTQ youth. And those are the ones who I worry about slipping through the cracks.
I'm actually working on a YA thriller about a queer homeless kid, and like while I was doing research, it is like insane the number of homeless queer kids there are, because it seems like it's one of those things where I'm like, I look at my life and I'm like, okay, well, even though I was like nervous about coming out, and I like waited until I was pretty much an adult, or until I knew that like how my parents would react. It's like some kids don't get that option. They don't get the chance to come out. They are either outed or something happens and they lose their home like overnight. And it's like, what, especially if they're in a rural area, like what are those kids going to do? The only option is for them to get to a city. But it's like, if you're 16, you may not have the money to even get a bus ticket to get to a city. If that could be like 4 hours away from you. Yeah. And it's like, it's just, there's such a blind spot, I think, for specifically queer kids, because it's like the outreach is only in cities. And it's like, what about kids who are not able to get to cities and are just, you have to get them there somehow. And they end up being taken advantage of that way. And it's just like, it's dark stuff.
It is. It's very heavy. It's not, I was going to say it's not cute, but I mean, that's the wrong word. No. It's not by any stretch of the imagination an easy thing to talk about, and it's even harder to live through. And I mean, Trevor Project is great because it's got a 1-800 number. They have counselors. I mean, it's so good. But, you just brought up a good point. Like if they're in rural and they need to get to a city or to a queer center that will help them, like there should definitely be, I don't know, someone who will pay for the bus tickets.
I have to see if I can find it again, but I think I might have bookmarked it. There's a content creator, and now it's escaping me, but who the content creator is, my memory is so bad, but who had created a literal like Google spreadsheet of at-risk LGBT youth and their Venmo or their Cash App. And so you can like just open it up and Venmo and Cash App any of those people. And it gives, I think there's like a little information or a link to their socials too. So you can like, kind of follow them along in their journeys. And it's so crazy because doing things like that is like, we need a spreadsheet to do it. Like to have it be so grassroots is like so wild to me. And I was talking to one of my best friends who is gay and honestly didn't even have like a coming out process. His parents always just kind of like knew, I guess. Yeah. And he's so lucky that he had that was like sort of his path. But he was saying that he thinks all the time, like, why would I choose a path that is harder and more dangerous? Like the thought of this, like being an active choice in like, why would anyone choose a harder, more dangerous path? And why would you not just allow people to like live the truth that they are, like actually live their true authentic self like everyone else is allowed to? Like why, whatever, but people are ignorant and disgusting. So
I mean, I don't know if this is just from decades of therapy and antidepressants. Like now I've finally entered this very zen place where I'm like, my parents did the best they could.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, when I was younger, I hated them for putting me through what they put me through. But now I'm like, there's generational trauma. They learned their behaviors from their parents, who learned their behaviors from their parents, who, going back.
Yeah.
Forever. I mean, it wasn't that uncommon for people to beat their kids 100 years ago. So we're still trying to move past that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's as an adult, and like having you be an adult and your parents be an adult, one of the greatest like healing experiences is being able to say like they did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. Like, and there's just not that much that you can, after that, it's like you've given them the grace that you can to allow for forgiveness, and you can still be like, that was really fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time be like, but I also understand that like, they're the product of their upbringing too.
Yeah. 100%.
Do you have contact with your family that you've written about, or?
So that's the question that always comes up whenever I do school visits, which is the kids are always like, what happened to your family? How did your parents take you riding this? I'm like, ooh. So my mom is undiagnosed, but every therapist I've been to, I'm like, obviously I describe her behavior and they're all like, she's bipolar. And so undiagnosed, so I don't know that, but I do know she is not mentally well. Before the free lunch came out, I sent her a copy of the book and a letter explaining why I wrote it. And I was like, this is not to make you look like a bad person. I tried to give you a 360, all around view. Like, I'm not painting you as a villain. I'm trying to paint you as a person who's struggling with poverty and domestic violence. And she never responded. I mean, but as it is, we only talk like every 5 years. Every Christmas, I leave a voicemail saying, I hope you're well. I'm well. Thank you for bringing me into this world. I love you. And that's it. And she never calls me back. And that's fine. Last year, my brother wanted to see her. Well, he didn't want to see her, but she wants to see her grandson, who's his first son. And he's like, okay, let's meet you and me first. So I can see how you are, because I'm not bringing my kid around you if you're still cuckoo.
Sure.
So yeah, I was in town, so I went with them, and the first 15 minutes, first 30 minutes was very pleasant. We talked about the weather. We talked about, I think it was mostly the weather. But then eventually, like, he was like, you owe me an apology for beating me and Rex. And she was like, no, And she ended up flipping the table in the middle of the restaurant, screaming at us top of her lungs. People were like, we're calling the cops.
Wow.
And he was attacking my brother first. And I was like, you need to chill. Everyone chill. And she turns on me and she's like, I read what you wrote.
Oh, she did read it.
And then my dad, who is not mentally ill and a very reasonable person, I just sent him 2 weeks ago a copy of Road Home with a letter saying basically the same thing. It's not, I'm not my intention to make you paint you as a bad person, but this is what happened. So I'm sharing it with the world.
Yeah. Has he gotten back to you yet?
I got a text. It was relatively nice. He hadn't read the book, but it was kind of like, okay. But again, we don't have a relationship. So yeah, it's weird. I mean, I've been an orphan my whole life, even though my parents are alive.
Yeah.
It gives me something to write about, pays the bills.
That's why you're so prolific.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
In the darkest corners of the internet, a nameless, formless entity has been growing. No one dares question where it was created or what it wants, but those who have been entranced by its musings chant its blood-curdling name in unison. Horror Movie Night!
Find Horror Movie Night on your favorite podcasting app or at hmnpodcast.com.
So when you are writing memoirs, what is the editorial process like? Like, how is it different from fiction? Because with fiction, at least for me, I'm like, it's always about trying to like get the pacing correct, and you're writing about your life. So is the editor like, okay, well, listen, this is a little dragging. Can we just combine these two events happening together? Like, does that ever happen?
So far I've had, I guess just two editors who did the memoir, Scholastic and Norton. And it's funny because with Scholastic, they always say Rex. They always address the character as Rex. And I've started to do that. I'm like, oh yeah, Rex should do this. Rex should do that. And it's actually good because it kind of distances me a little bit. But the thing is like, I have to push back a lot because I'm like, well, this is what happened. Like I can't change it. But I will say like memoirs are maybe 95% true because A, legally they make you change all the names. B, the dialogue. I mean, I have a great memory. Not for last week because I don't remember anything from last week. I remember my childhood amazingly. But I don't know the exact dialogue. I just remember the feelings of the dialogue. So I kind of have to fill in the gaps. But then the other thing is really trying to make a narrative with a beginning and an end is so difficult. Because like you said, with fiction, you can do whatever you want. Like if something's not working, you can drop this character, you can merge this scene, you can do whatever you need to make it a better story. But with memoirs, it's super difficult. But my editors have kind of helped me, like you said, when the story's dragging, they're like, well, maybe we can cut this chapter. It doesn't really lend anything to the thesis. And but it's funny because things get cut and then it's like my stepsister outed me and Road Home. And I think I was able to kind of paint a good picture of her, but I'm sure she'll be pissed off because I didn't like explain more. But I'm like, that's not the thesis of the story. I'm trying to get to the thesis of the story, which is about
And you also are telling the story from your perspective. So it's like in those moments, you're not thinking about, I mean, I don't want to say, I don't want to speak on your experience, but like, you're not really thinking about like the complexity of every person in your life when you're like in this space where you're hurt and this like very deeply traumatic thing is happening to you, caused by someone who you're supposed to be able to trust and feel this like mutual love and respect for. You're not sitting there, especially as a teen or adult or kid, thinking about the complexity of each person in your life. And so, I mean, there has to be, I hope, some grace in that too.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, because it's weird because I'm stepping back into who I was at that age. Because I'm not, there are a lot of celebrities who write memoirs as adults, as they are now, reflecting back on their childhood. My books don't do that. I'm literally 12 years old again or 17 years old again, and I'm on the street and I'm feeling these emotions and I have no hope because I don't know what's coming next. So to get back in that mindset is why it's so hard to write these, because it's so raw and I'm literally regressing emotionally.
Yeah.
Jeez, I don't think I'd be able to do that.
I feel like I would need like a weekend retreat with a therapist holding my hand the entire time.
Therapy and antidepressants are great for me.
We're a big proponent of therapy on this podcast. I think we talk about it almost every episode.
And antidepressants.
Yeah.
Who's not getting by?
Do you have, so based on that, I would assume that you enjoy writing fiction more. Like you have a little bit more freedom. It's a little more exciting and you maybe don't have to do it.
I mean, because fiction, you're just free. And like, I will say, like, I try to balance things out. Like I write something really hard and then I write something really easy. And not that the writing is easy, but like the tone and like while I was writing Road Home, I was writing a graphic novel for middle grade called Bubblegum Coven, which is about 5 6th grade kids who find out they're witches. It's basically X-Men with magic.
Love that.
Each one has a very
that's a great name too, by the way.
That needs to be the name of a pop girl group,
right?
Bubblegum Coven.
Yeah. So like I said, if I'm writing something really difficult, I write something super light and super fun, just to balance it out. Yeah.
I'm looking also, if you see me looking over here, I'm looking at all of the covers of everything because they're so beautiful.
I have that up on my second screen too.
Yeah, they're so nice.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with myself for making a website.
It's a great website. It really is.
Yeah.
Your graphic novels too, like we said, you wrote for X-Men and Superman. So for those ones, do people reach out to you? Do like Marvel or DC reach out to you saying, "Hey, we have this story, we want you to write it," or do you get to pitch it? Like, how does that work?
Well, I worked in comic book. My first job, well, not my first job in New York, but my first real job, I guess, was working at DC Comics. And so I was there for 6 years. So I got in good with all these editors. And then when I was leaving, they're like, "Oh my God, we're going to give you so much work. Like, you're a great writer." And then I left and that didn't happen. So I stalk a lot of editors. I try to be friends with them on social media, which sometimes works, but more often does not. So I always chase down stuff. Like I'm always pitching myself to editors. They often do not respond to my emails, which always makes me sad, but I do not take it personally. But I will say there is one editor at DC who at least once a year, like throws me a bone and like gives me a project. And I'm always really grateful for that. So she's amazing. Cool. Shout out to Katie Kubert.
Wait, so there's one that I'm seeing here, The Conjuring.
Yes.
First of all, how is that DC?
So this was Katie Kubert. She wanted to do like a horror line, like partner with big movie franchises that are horror, and then do like comic book, either prequels or sequels or side stories. I think there were, and not just that, she also did stuff like original horror comic books. But yeah, she reached out to me. She's like, "You want to do The Conjuring?" And I was like, "Yes."
That's so cool. I know that there are people who are horror fans who kind of feel like The Conjuring is a little bit of cheap horror. I don't care. I love the whole universe. I love the Annabelle. I don't really like the Nun. I could take or leave the Nun, but I love The Conjuring. I have watched that movie, like, especially during quarantine where like time didn't matter. It was like 10 a.m. and I was just like watching The Conjuring in my room.
Yeah. I love anything that scares me. I mean, thrill me, make my heart race. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's very
Alyssa,
cool.
remind me to remind you to bring that up when we talk with Jennifer Dugan later, because I think that is her favorite horror movie. If it's not her favorite, it is one of her favorite horror movies. Yes. We have author Jennifer Dugan coming on in a couple days that we're going to talk about, again, graphic novels and horror and stuff like that. But that actually is a great lead in to talk about North Ranger, because it is your graphic novel retelling of North Ranger Abbey by Jane Austen, which is not a horror, right? I have not read it. Is it like a ghost story?
So it is very much her poking fun at Victorian. I mean, it's like Victorian literature, but Jane Austen is not Victorian. I think she's Georgian, but people say Victorian. Basically, it was her poking fun at like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like she took it because the original story, like the main protagonist, the heroine, is reading all these scary stories and she's obsessed with them, but she starts projecting them onto her own life, and then misadventures appear. So that's kind of what I did with North Ranger. But I do get a little more emotional towards the end, because I think queer youth in rural Texas in the 80s, or no, I guess I put it modern day because I have cell phones. But even so, rural Texas gay kids are dealing with a lot more, I think, than kids in cities where they're widely accepted.
Yeah, for sure. What's the process of doing a graphic novel too? So like when you're doing a graphic novel, obviously like there's images that are also being created. Are you part of like the storyboarding process? Like how does that work?
For me, I mean, keep in mind, I was an editor for years and years. I grew up on comic books. And I think there's a certain art form to it that a lot of people don't realize. Just like page turns are important. Action should always move from the left to the right, so it draws the eye to a page turn. When there's an emotional moment, give it a splash. Or if there's an action moment, give it a 2-page splash. So there's all these tricks of the trade that, I learned along the way. But when you're writing a graphic novel, it's like a book in the sense like you come up with the main idea, but as you break it down into pages, I do it like 5 panels on this page. Here's the description for each panel, and here's the dialogue. Every graphic novelist does it different. That's how I do it, and I include a lot of reference. But it's more, I hope my artists follow it, but if they have a better idea, it's kind of a guide, and they change it up, and they're like, I'm going to do this instead. And I'm like, okay, that works. Or every once in a while, I'm like, that doesn't work. And then I push it. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Do you get any input, like when you're working with the artist? Do they send you like a kind of like a pencil sketch to be like, all right, so here's how it looks right now? Do you get like any kind of creative control with their art specifically, where you're like, ooh, can you actually make this person look like this or more like that?
Yes.
Or change this specific thing?
Usually I give them a character breakdown at the beginning, and then the first thing they do is do like character workups, so that I can see what they're thinking the characters look like. And I'll be like, okay, maybe change this, maybe do that. For the most part, I want them to have fun and draw what they want to draw. But if it's better for the character to wear plaid or something, if there's a specific story reason, then I will give them notes if there's not. But there's stages. So they send pencils, then they send inks, and then there's colors, and then lettering. In the thumbnails or in the pencil stage, like you can be like, this is good, but it would work better if you did this.
I'm so fascinated by this.
As an editor, I will say, because I saw that you do, you work with a lot of the same artists for your own graphic novels. So as an editor, was there ever times when an artist would push back and you're like, no, you need to do what I'm telling you because I am right? Or the other side, have you ever had pushback and the artist was actually right and you're like, oh, that's actually a good thing? Okay.
You know what? I pick my battles a lot of the time. I'm not going to go through page by page, panel by panel and be like, change this, change this, change this, change this. But I'll be like, okay, you know what? This is good, but all the characters on these 2 pages, like their head and their bodies are the exact same perspective, like distance. And I'm like, maybe pull the camera out or pull the camera in. so that it varies. You'll get bored if every panel is the same shape, if every panel has the same character close up. It's like a movie. You want to pull out, you want to get a broad landscape for establishing shots, for emotional shots. It's good to have close up. I urge artists to, because at the end of the day, an editor's job, if they're doing their jobs right, is to make the artist and the writer look like geniuses. And I think that creatives should listen to their editors, and only push. I mean, if they push back, then it's a compromise. It's a collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. I actually just got a review for my third book that said, I'm a masterful plotter. And I just laughed and laughed and laughed. And I sent it, my editor sent it to me and I replied back and I was like, masterful plotter. That means you did a great job, Kristen. Great job.
Amazing. It's so funny.
Oh my God.
That's another thing we ask every writer who comes on here. Are you a plotter or a pantser? I'm a pantser.
Oh, wait, what? A plotter or what?
Pantser. Wait, do you not know this?
I've never heard this.
It's probably because you write memoirs a lot. It's like your entire story has already been plotted out. So a plotter writes to a plot. They write an outline first, and then they write their story that way.
Right.
A pantser has an idea. They sit down, they start writing, and they just write it without an idea of where it's going to go.
Okay, no, I was a pantser in my teens and 20s, and that did not work for me. In my 30s, I started doing outlines. Oh my God, outlines saved my life, especially with graphic novels, because my outlines they'll start as 5 pages, they'll grow to 10, they'll grow to 20, sometimes 25, 30. But I need like every beat to be there so that I know the direction, the path that I'm going. But I will say, like, as I'm writing, the stories often start writing themselves, especially the characters. The characters are like, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, I did not think of that, but good for you.
Good for you. I like how when you started answering the question, you're like, oh my God, no.
That sounds terrifying to me now.
We've talked about Eric and his chaos before. Yeah. Chaos.
Listen, we had an author, Anna Gracia, who was on, and she writes drafts and then deletes them.
Woo!
And she rewrites the entire book. No. He will write probably like 30,000 words and go, okay, I think I know where this is going now. Delete it and start over. Like, puts it right in the trash.
That is insane to me.
It terrifies me.
I'm literally sweating. Like, that stresses me out.
I'm like, no. My draft is 120,000 words and it's supposed to be a YA thriller, but it's okay. I'll figure it out later. I'll delete stuff after I already turn it in.
Yeah. I don't write. And so, I mean, like, I write just like in normal day life, but I've never written a book, never attempted to write a book. And so I can't imagine putting in that much time and effort into something and then just being like, I could probably do it again.
Agree.
The thought of even like the way, like, learning about how this whole process works, where like you'll write a book and then you have to like pitch it to publishers, and then it could just like, they could just be like, no, or they could be like, yeah, we'll take it for $5,000.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I just wrote a book. Pay me $1 million. I just wrote a book.
Yeah.
You know, like, I can't. I'm not like, I don't have that many ideas. So if I came up with enough of an idea that I wrote a book, you better be paying me $1 million because it's not happening again.
That's the other reason I'm prolific, is because I have to pay the bills. And I will say, middle grade novels, they don't pay as much as young adult novels. I'm guessing. I just feel like I know a couple authors who are YA authors who write one book a year. And I'm like, and they don't do anything else. They just write one book a year. And I'm like, you don't have a job? And they're like, no. And I'm like, good for you. That's amazing.
I'm a realtor on the side, so I can't live off of one book a year either. But as a YA author, I'm only allowed to publish one book a year. I have to go into other things.
I didn't know
there's
that.
like the publisher doesn't want you publishing something within the same age category in the same year.
Oh,
so
I learned something new.
I have 6 publishers.
Wow. The finesse. I love it. Wow. That's so crazy.
They had, I think it was, there's a Penguin Random House versus the Department of Justice lawsuit that they just had to post information of what, like, Penguin Random House, their guidelines in the US for who gets an advance and how much it's for. Category 4 is a title with a sales goal of 5,000 to 10,000 units. The advance is 50,000 or less.
Okay.
Category 3, titles with sales of 10,000 to 25,000 units. The advance is between 50,000 and 150,000. I'm not going to read all of it. Category 1 is lead title sales with a sales goal of 75,000 books and up is 500,000 and up. I don't think any of that is true because, first of all,
that is true for celebrities. They will give that money to celebrities because they have a huge reach. And I worked on one celebrity book in my career as an editor, and it was a category 1.
Wow.
I mean, just the idea of being like, oh, well, between 10,000 and 25,000 units, there are some authors who don't even sell 10,000 copies in their entire career.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody would be getting that.
Yeah.
That advance. It's just, I don't know who at Penguin Random House put that forward, but you know what? My publisher's not Penguin Random House, so it's entirely possible. It's true, but
yeah. But you can call me category 4.
Same.
Same. Oh my gosh, it's so wild.
I want to talk more about horror because I feel like every author who comes on here who likes horror stuff, I just want to jump in and talk about horror. You reference a lot of horror movies in North Ranger. What is your favorite horror movies, or even your favorite franchise?
So here is the thing: when it comes to franchises, there are 2. The first one is the Universal monster movies of the 1940s, 50s, the black and white.
I do love them.
Because when I was a kid, that is what introduced me to horror, and I loved it. I loved being scared. I loved the otherworldly thing. I think my life was so shit that escape was very important to me. So the more fantastical, the more strange, the more dark, the better. But then I saw Alien, and that changed my life. Some people don't consider Alien a horror movie.
Yeah,
I do, because it's dark. It's in tight places. They're being chased by a monster. It's just so expertly done. Yeah, but that's just like the first 2. Yeah,
the franchise is not horror, but the first one definitely is.
Yeah.
And then I think Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of the first movies that I saw as a kid. The first horror movies that I saw as a kid that I was like, oh, I love this. And at the time, I didn't realize the guy in the creature outfit is hot. So that's a double bonus that you get as an adult. So
now I need to look that up.
Look him up. When he has that Gilman face off, he's a rockin' bod, cute Italian guy.
That's so funny. What's crazy is, so like my parents didn't watch any horror movies at all. So like I didn't get introduced to them until I was like in middle school. And the first one that I saw, because I was in middle school and I'm 30, was The Ring. What a way to start. That
is a rough start, because that movie scared me, and I was already a horror pro when that came out.
7 days.
Don't even give me a VHS tape. I would shit bricks. I was so scared. And then, so after that experience, I didn't sleep for like days. I was so scared. And then I didn't revisit them until I was maybe like in college. And then I got more into it. And then last year I decided it would be really fun to work at a Spirit Halloween, because one opened up near my house. Okay. Don't do that. Never do that. Why? Because I lived there. I was there all the time. And now I will say it's nice to have an employee discount. And in my room, I just have the craziest stuff now. I bought an inflatable Mike Wazowski costume when it went on sale. We just really... so that was the good part, but it's almost like if you had Christmas every day, it doesn't feel as fun. And having Halloween every day from August to the beginning of November, after a while I was like, I can't wait for next year, because I'm not going to do this. We're not doing this.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's something I didn't think about. Definitely. I would want to. Oh, what a shame.
I know.
Halloween is my favorite holiday, so it's ruining that.
I love haunted houses. They are I love to go with my friends because I run ahead and I hide. And I will do things where I literally get on the floor.
Oh my
God.
So
when they're walking into the shadows, I grab their ankles. Horrifying.
I want to tell you about my favorite haunted house experience. I went to this one. It was like we would go with my friends every year. We would just pick like random ones and go to. Some of them are terrible. Some of them probably don't even have insurance, and I was going to die in. But there was one that was so well done. And it was supposed to be this mental institution. It was just like a house, but they like built it and everything on this farm. Yeah. And like when you go to like check in while you're waiting, they have all these intake forms that they make you fill out, and you check off what you're there for treatment of. And it has all of these like generic fears listed. There's like fear of spiders, snakes, enclosed spaces. They somehow, when they let your group into the entryway, they take everybody's cards, they know who it goes with. Yep. And in each room you go in, they will separate you and put you in to make you face that fear. So like one of the things that I did is claustrophobia. They pulled me out of my friend group and put me into a coffin that's just on the wall. And I'm 6'5", so I'm in this coffin like this. And then the back door opens out and this guy is there and he's like, and then just like shushes me, gets me to follow him into the secret passageway. And then I get to go through like 2 rooms where I watch them get tortured, like in a fun way. Yeah. And then they let me kind of pop out later. And at the very end, there's this graveyard that you're just walking through. And then there's these voices that are just whispering your name and saying all this stuff. It was so well done. And it was like, you could tell it's very, very like cheap, but it's just the fact that they put that thought into it. Yeah. I wanted to go back again, but then they didn't do it the next year. I was like,
oh my God.
Oh, where was it? Where is that based?
It was in New Jersey. It was some farm in New Jersey. And honestly, I don't even remember what the farm was called. Yeah. But it was a corn maze and a hayride. And then they also had this just big giant bonfire with a stage and a live band and everything.
That sounds
amazing.
It
seems like people in the town just went there to hang out.
Oh my God.
It was really cool.
God forbid New Jersey does something good twice.
Right. If anybody is listening to this and happen to have worked there, please let me know if it's still around, and maybe if you just moved locations or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back again.
Real.
That sounds amazing.
It was great. Yeah. It was like my favorite one.
I could go on about haunted houses forever. So, did you want to talk?
We should just make an entire podcast about haunted houses.
Did you mean books?
Rex, do you live in LA, right?
I do.
Do you do Hollywood Horror Nights?
That's fine.
It's like, well, you can't. So yeah, it's one of those things where I went, and for the first 20 minutes. I was scared. And then after that, I was just cracking up. I was cracking up the whole time because it was just so much fun. And I think at a certain point, when, like if being scared is fun for you, you get to a certain point where I feel like for the people who are scared, they're watching you and they're like, there's something mentally going on here. Something's not right because you're just laughing and there's a clown chasing you with a knife. And I'm like,
It makes me giggle. I will say the ones I like the best are not the franchise ones. They have a holiday one where you go through the whole year, and I'm like, yes, that's good. Yeah. And then last year they did a Mexican monsters one, and I was like, fantastic.
Cool.
Like, this is great.
That's cool. I liked when I only went the one time. This was, I think, 2019. And so they had like the purge alarm, and that was how you knew that it was going to start. And then there were like all of these like crazy looking creatures with like chainsaws, and they're like running up to you. And it's so funny because everyone's an adult. Everyone's like consented to be scared. So like they basically, if they haven't scared you the first time, they're sticking around. They're making dead eye contact with you until you pee your pants. Like they don't care. And it's really fun. I love haunted houses too. I always get so nervous right before. Every time I've done a haunted house, like last year I went with producer Matt. He took me to a haunted house corn maze situation out where he lives. And I was like, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know why I get like literally so scared that I'm actually going to die in these. And then the first couple screams, after that, I'm okay.
Was it Arisafa Farms? Or the Bates Motel.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. They've been doing that for years. They're professionals.
Yeah. That was fun. Yeah. And also Matt at some point did tell them my name. And so we walked into a room and they were like, is there an Alyssa here? And I'm like, yeah, there is. What?
Amazing.
I used to see the TikTok videos of horror nights and it always looks so crowded. And I'm like, I could never do that.
Yeah, it is.
Crowds.
It is. And it also gets less scary when there's more people around. Like 100%. It just doesn't, the isolation in horror movie or haunted houses is really important for the scare. Yeah. And if there's people everywhere, you're like, we got numbers, so it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not the
and
same.
You see them getting scared ahead of you, so you know what's coming.
Yeah, you know what's coming. Yeah, it ruins the experience a little bit, but I don't know. Oh, no, I'm so excited for Halloween. I'm so mad it's only April.
Almost here. So Rex, what is in the future for you? What do you want to write next?
Actually, speaking of, I want to do horror. I actually have been working on this pitch for a horror series. It's hard to get a publisher to pick up a horror series, so I'll probably sell one. But I'm going to try. And it's middle grade horror just because I think, okay, I'll tell y'all, it's middle grade graphic novel horror because it doesn't exist yet. There's so much middle grade horror, but there's no graphic novel horror. So I'm like,
cool.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
You be the leader of the pack, and then we'll all just follow you.
I've written two screenplays, and they're both holiday horror. So I'm like, but
love it.
Out and no one's biting. But yeah, so horror. I want to do more queer graphic novel retellings of classics under my pen name Ray Terciero. I have a couple. I literally have a 10-year spreadsheet with everything I want to publish in the next 10 years. So yeah, there's a lot on there. So my goal is just to keep writing. I got laid off last year and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So now I just need to find a way to pay my bills writing books. Easier said than done. But I'm loving it. I wake up, I write, and that's awesome.
That is awesome.
That's great. Well, I think this is a great episode. Thank you for coming. I hope you had a great time.
I did. Thank you so much for having me.
Our listeners, you can get Road Home. It is out. It's April 30th. Am I right?
May 14th.
May 14th. Darn. I was mixing up a different one, I think. So May 14th, but also Free Lunch, Punching Bag. They're out right now. So is the Supernatural Society. You can get the graphic novels under Ray Terciero.
Yes.
Where can listeners find you as well?
RexOgle.com. That's REXOGLE. Or just find me on Instagram. I'm under Third Rex, spelled out. And you can see pictures of my dog. And I post a lot of cartoons. So yeah.
Awesome.
I love it.
Well, thanks for coming, Rex.
We didn't ask Rex what he's reading now.
Oh, what are you reading?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm reading the last. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Hold on, a second. It's right here. It's the last Quintista. I can never get the name right, which is Mexican for storyteller. It's so good. It's sci-fi. It's middle grade, but it's so wonderful. I'm like, I picked it up and I can't put it down. So
love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
When she asks me how far we can take it, I tell her we can take it across the entire universe. You are my universe. I'm just a
Well, thank you for listening to YAOK. If you... Actually, Alyssa, what are you reading right now?
I am reading, hold on, I pulled it up because I just started it and I felt like I was going to forget, and I did. Listen for the Lie is what I'm reading right now. I used Book of the Month, and I got that as my Book of the Month, I think in like February, and I haven't read it yet, but it had, it was very well reviewed, I guess. So,
is it a thriller?
Yes, but it doesn't feel like one right now. Like we're learning about a story about a murder from the perspective of the person who's accused of the murder, but it's actually quite funny. So, and it's also like partially being told in a transcript of a podcast, a true crime podcast episode about her. So it's interesting. And I feel like I'll be able to fly through it because of that format.
Definitely.
But I just started it. So far, I like it. It's funny. Really cool. Yeah. What are you reading, Eric?
I'm actually reading a thriller as well. I was just talking about how I went to Spain earlier this month, and it got me in the mood for a book that takes place in Spain. I'm reading one. It's called The Invisible Guardian. There is it's a trilogy, and they have all been made into Spanish movies as well. And it takes place in the Basque Country, which is like northern central Spain, and it is these teenage girls keep showing up murdered, and it's like a ritualistic killing, and they are starting people in the town think that it is this mythological creature from Basque mythology that is killing them, but the inspector who has been trained in FBI in Quantico and then came back over to Spain to help them, she is like, no, this is a human and I'm going to prove it. Wow. But it's really interesting. It's like,
that's a very cool story.
It is. And I feel like it's something that, especially for it to be translated into English, it's something that we don't really get a lot of in the States, where it's like, okay, well, here's this mythological thing or like these superstitions about this culture that we are kind of going to explore. And it's really interesting. I'm like halfway through, but I think I might read the other two as well. So
what is it called?
It's called The Invisible Guardian.
I'll never reach the bottom of my TBR. I'll never get even close.
No, I don't think it's possible. I don't think, you know what? That's not the goal. The goal is to just keep adding. I feel like.
That's true. That's true. That's very true. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of YAOK and that you're reading something wonderful right now. You can follow us on Instagram at YAOK Podcast.
Yeah, and tell us what you're reading or send us a review. We might read it online. And since we haven't yet, no one's done it. So if you're listening, I haven't too.
I love that.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.